Welcome, it's your friendly neighborhood Badger here, and I'm back with a pretty unscheduled video, I would say. 17 minutes ago, Chris Wilson just uploaded a really long and in-depth overview of his thoughts of Expedition League and things from before Expedition League leading up to it, in response to a lot of the community's, outcry or accusations about certain things. And I thought it would just be the best thing for me to do to just jump on. For those of you who don't jump on the Reddit anymore or anything like that, I got this sent to me. I don't usually jump on, but I got this sent to me, and I thought it was really good to just give it to the entire community for you guys to read. So I'm going to basically text-to-speech through it and then talk about my feelings at the end. So let's just get right into it. So Chris is the lead developer on Grinding Gear Games on Path of Exile, and here he just wants to address a bunch of things. So first of all, let's jump right into his introduction. Hey Reddit, says Chris. We've read heaps of feedback on Reddit over the last week and wanted to address some of the topics that have come up a lot. There has been speculation that I've personally been driving the balance changes to match my original vision for Path of Exile. There is a little truth to this, in that I want to restore areas of the game that were important but have been eroded, but almost every area of specific balance work is the product of a large team of designers working together for a long time to come up with solutions to problems we want to address. We care more about making a good game than we do about vanity metrics like player concurrency records. I suspect this is because we're gamers first and business people second. The direction of Path of Exile was going in over the last year was breaking player records, but wasn't really leaving us happy with our own game. For more than a year, we've been accumulating changes that we were worried about releasing because they would affect the way people currently play Path of Exile. We understand that our game is an escape for some players, and if that is potentially disrupted, it could be very upsetting for them. We have great appreciation for the fact that Path of Exile has become a part of your lives. When someone comes into my office with a prospective nerf, more than half the time I suggest we don't do it because it would hurt a build without sufficiently good reason. We try to be very cautious and to care about your experience within Path of Exile. Unfortunately, we've been hitting a breaking point with power creep recently and really need to address it. Meanwhile, much of the community has grown increasingly unhappy with the direction the game is heading in. It honestly feels to us that this is in part because we've moved further away from our vision over time. So you're unhappy and we're unhappy, and that means it's really time we start to correct things. The changes we're making in Expedition are a carefully considered set that sound daunting but probably have less overall impact on the way you'll play the game than you suspect they may. These changes really open up the possibilities for the future, and it puts us in a good position for working towards the release of Path of Exile 2. When I'm writing to the community, I usually try to avoid saying what is fun and what isn't, as it's quite subjective, but we are very confident that the new Path of Exile is going to be more fun. There's a wealth of powerful new builds out there to discover, and we honestly can't wait to see what you come up with. I'd like to talk about some specific topics that have come up on Reddit in the last week. The first topic. What is your motivation behind increasing the mana cost of so many support gems? Why wasn't this mentioned in the Game Balance Manifesto? Chris goes on to state, during the game-wide balance assessment we did in 3.15, we identified many support gems that just cost too little mana and need to be adjusted up to the fair baseline for their effects. We mentioned this in the manifesto as, we've also taken this opportunity to make mana multipliers on support gems more consistent. In general, mana multipliers have gone up slightly, but several gems have had mana multipliers lowered as a result of this pass. At the time of writing, we hadn't worked out the final values for these gems, and hence the manifesto section was written vaguely and inadvertently downplayed the extent of the changes. I'm sorry about this, and we'll try to be clearer in the future. This is especially disappointing because our main intent with the manifesto was to make sure that it had detailed and transparent explanations for most of our big changes. The second point. Why did you remove the cold damage over time stat from hypothermia? Chris says, we're going to be re-adding cold damage over time to hypothermia, granting 29% more at gem level 20. Hypothermia was never intended to be a cold dot support gem. It just had the cold damage over time stat added because cold dot builds needed more support gems at the time. As there were now more alternatives and the support gem was effectively two different supports combined into one, we decided to remove it. A lot of players have found the removal confusing or jarring, and we don't really have any balance concerns with it being there, so we've decided to add it back for now. We'll remove it from hypothermia again when we create another cold dot focused support gem in the future. Number 3. Do you really believe that Ultimatum had poor player retention because it was too rewarding? Now, this is in reference to a previous Reddit post. I was interviewed by Jason at VentureBeat, and we chatted about the Ultimatum League. The takeaway line is that is quoted from this interview is that I felt that Ultimatum had bad retention because it was too rewarding, and people are quick to point out that this was not the problem with Ultimatum. I agree, says Chris. Chris agrees with this. That wasn't the problem. I'll specify. The quote from the interview is as follows. Retention during the league was poor. I would say it was in the bottom 40% of leagues, a bit below average. And this is partly because, for the league, both its combat was a bit spammy and its item rewards were a bit spammy, said Wilson. There are two things we had determined during playtesting that became apparent over the course of the league, and so the fact that it was quite heavy with its reward systems meant that players played it for less time than they normally would, and this was quite useful to learn from. And then he omits some sections just to skip to a little bit of the last bit. So overall player numbers dipped a little bit more than they would have during the third month, which is disappointing, but it's a consequence of the way the Ultimatum was designed. To put my thoughts into a considered written reply, says Chris in this post, rather than an off-the-cuff answer to an unexpected question in an interview primarily about Expedition, there were two big problems with the Ultimatum League from my point of view. The first problem, the encounters themselves didn't have great combat. They achieved challenge just by spamming a whole lot of rare monsters at you, and it was hard to follow what was going on. And number two, while the core Ultimatum double or nothing item reward system was decent, the absolutely massive spam of items that occurred after these encounters was unnecessary and only contributes to the problems that Path of Exile has with items currently. Chris says he absolutely agrees that the first of these points, spammy encounters, alongside other meta issues, stale metagame, contributed far more to poor retention than the heavy rewards did. The rewards issue is more of a long-term problem, and I should not have implied that it was related to immediate performance of the league. Moving on to another point here. In this clip, I won't play the clip, but I'll talk about, what it says here. Chris mentioned that you weren't going to make sudden, extreme changes to the game. Are these changes in line with that statement? Chris goes on to say, the balance changes we're making in Path of Exile in 3.15 are not the type of drastic changes that I was referring to in that clip from 2019. The changes that were made to the Marvel Heroes game, were 10 times as impactful as what we were doing here. I would agree with that as well if you've checked out what happened to Marvel Heroes. We are not fundamentally changing how Path of Exile is played to anywhere near to a significant degree. We are not looking at 1-minute map runs and saying that they should now take 10 minutes. Yes, the balance changes do have an impact on the design of many builds, but those builds will still be capable and appropriately powerful afterwards. I know the changes are daunting to look at before you're able to experience them in-game, but there are so many more opportunities for viable builds now, and we're expecting it to be a lot more engaging to play. By the way, Chris says, I stand by exactly what I said in that 2019 interview. We often discuss making larger changes to the game, and we cite the points mentioned in that clip as the reason to be careful, to not change too much at once, and to seek community feedback on the changes. We've been carefully following your feedback and will continue to do so once you've had a chance to play and let us know how it has affected your builds in practice. Here's another point. Why didn't you nerf Aurabots, Chris? Is this favoritism from the developers? Chris says, we don't have a specific plan that we're ready to commit to yet, in reference to Aurabots. We like how auras individually work and feel that stacking a bunch of auras on your own character also has appropriate costs. We know that dedicated aura support characters are very powerful, but we don't have a specific plan ready for 3.15 to address this, so it hasn't been included in the patch. We have given all of our balance changes a lot of thought and testing, and want to apply the same standards to a potential aura change. Some players speculate that because Mark, or Neon, played this build in the past, he is protecting it from nerfs. A plan wasn't brought to him for approval in 3.15, and we have had a lot of nerfs already, so we didn't go out of the way to rush one in. Moving on. Do you make game balance decision based on incorrect data from the community wiki? This is in reference to a 4,000 upvote thread about how the balance skills were looking at incorrect data on the wiki. Chris says we don't use the wiki for doing balance work. The numbers that we tweak in our internal tools are in an entirely different form than the final values you see in the game or on the wiki. What happened in this case was a mistake while preparing the patch notes. The person preparing the patch notes often copy-paste the formatting for skill stat descriptions from the wiki and then adjust the values to the correct ones based on the skill's balance history. Unfortunately, with over 1,000 distinct patch notes to write, many of which only getting final values in the last few days, mistakes were made and a few values were left unmodified and incorrect. This led to a misleading patch note and a lot of confusion. This was a mistake and it shouldn't have happened. But I can assure you that we aren't balancing based on Wikidata when we have it in a significantly different form in our internal tools. With over 100 developers and thousands of changes going into each expansion, communicating everything clearly is a challenge. We will continue to improve this process and welcome any feedback about how we can make changes to Path of Exile in a way that is better understood and less upsetting to players. If you have feedback about what you would have preferred us to have done differently during our pre-launch period this time, please share it with us. In the meantime, I'm going to get back to playtesting Expedition. See you Friday. So that took about 10 minutes to get through, so obviously that was a lot of information right there that Chris addressed on. Now, what are my thoughts on the matter? So, number one, the first thing that I want to say is many of the points brought up here are very valid points from the community. People have been upset with how things have been presented, with how things have gone about in terms of mistakes being made, and they have appropriately reached out and been like, why is this happening? That's totally fine. Once again, I will like to state when it gets to a point, there is, two different types of people that do complain about things. There's the constructive criticism, and then there is attacking people, actually attacking GGG employees or attacking streamers or attacking actual individual players of the game itself. When attacks are actually made with baseless accusations, then obviously things do have to come up with Chris saying here and trying to defend himself and being like, look, this is as transparent as I can be. The second point that I would like to say here is Chris is being entirely transparent as far as we can tell. Obviously, he's trying to word this in a way that comes across as passive as possible and not as threatening in terms of, accusing people for, accusing him about things, this back and forth. He's very much trying to diffuse the situation here. And it's done in a really professional way. And I do applaud Chris for this. For a lead developer on a video game such as Path of Exile to write such a massively transparent, big, just dump of words here, dump in the best way possible, as I can say, is almost unheard of in a video game. And we as Path of Exile players should feel very lucky to be in the hands of Chris. Now, that does not excuse whether you really are feeling very disheartened by this league, and honestly, my serious condolences to you if these changes are really affecting you and you don't want to play Path of Exile anymore. That's super fair. Honestly, there's a lot of sweeping changes coming, and that makes a bunch of sense. Personally, myself, I'm really intrigued to get into these mostly nerfs and see how they do actually feel. It's going to be, I think, a lot of fun, as Chris said. I just hope that it doesn't feel too much worse than what Path of Exile used to feel in the past few leagues, what we've gotten used to, basically. That being said, I have a frame of reference for, playing the game 6-7 years ago, so I do have that, and a lot of people don't. It's really rough. So what I'm going to end off with here is actually I'm going to give Chris Wilson a call just to thank him for this, and just to see if he has anything else to say. All right. I've got him on speed dial here, so let's just get him through here.
Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games.
Hey Chris, sorry, I'm just chucking on my headphones. How you doing, man? You going pretty good?
Hey, how are things going?
No, I think it's going well with you.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, you're well?
I'm doing really well, actually.
Okay, good, cool. All right, sorry, I think maybe there's like a little bit of latency. Australia and New Zealand, there's a bit there. But, I just want to say thank you very much for your Reddit post. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really good job on that one.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. You got anything else that you would like to say? Anything else?
I would rather keep true to the way we've designed the game.
Okay, cool. Look, that's something that you very much say often, and I think you've said in an interview before a long time ago, which is pretty funny. But thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for coming. I'll catch you around.
Okay.
Now, full disclosure, that is a soundboard. I didn't actually call Chris. But yeah, thanks for watching. Badger out.